The night was supposed to be a fresh start. Marcus sat at the head of the table, surrounded by friends, laughter, and the soft clinking of glasses. His divorce was finalized, and instead of mourning the end of his marriage, he chose to celebrate his newfound freedom. It had been a long, painful journey, one filled with heartbreak, betrayal, and endless court battles. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight was about moving on. Then she walked in. All heads turned as his ex-wife Jasmine stepped into the dimly lit lounge. Dressed in an elegant black dress, she carried herself with the same confidence that once made Marcus fall for her. Whispers filled the room. Why was she here? What could she possibly want now that everything was over? Marcus leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening. He had no interest in another argument or rehashing old wounds. But Jasmine wasn't here to fight. Without saying a word, she slid a small envelope across the table toward him. "You need to see this," she said, her voice calm but firm. Marcus hesitated before picking it up. The atmosphere shifted. His friends fell silent, sensing the tension. He pulled out the paper inside, his eyes scanning the words. The words that made his heart pound. The words that turned his stomach. The words that changed everything he thought he knew. His fingers trembled. His breath caught in his throat. He looked up at Jasmine, searching for answers, but she simply held his gaze. What is this?" he finally managed to say. Jasmine's expression remained unreadable. "You tell me," she said softly. And in that moment, Marcus realized his entire world was about to collapse. Marcus's grip tightened around the paper as his mind raced. The room around him faded into the background. The laughter, the music, the clinking of glasses, it was all just noise now. His eyes darted back to the words in front of him. A DNA test. A result that made no sense. His chest tightened, his pulse hammering in his ears. Jasmine didn't flinch. She just stood there watching him. Waiting. Marcus swallowed hard, forcing himself to breathe. "Where did you get this?" His voice was low, almost a whisper, but there was no mistaking the edge behind it. Jasmine tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "Does it matter?" she asked. "You deserve to know the truth." The truth. Marcus wanted to laugh at the word. Truth was something he thought he already had, something he had fought to hold onto during the messy divorce. He had been the one blindsided when their marriage crumbled. He had been the one left picking up the pieces. And now, after everything, she shows up. Here tonight, with this? He glanced up, scanning the faces around him, his closest friends, all of them frozen in awkward silence, shifting in their seats, pretending not to stare. The weight of their eyes pressed down on him. This wasn't just between him and Jasmine anymore. His hands felt cold as he folded the paper and placed it on the table. He needed a second to think, to process, but Jasmine wasn't done. "You were never going to find out on your own," she continued, her voice softer now, almost regretful. "And whether you believe it or not, I didn't do this to hurt you." Marcus met her gaze, searching for something. Remorse, guilt, anything that could explain why she would drop this bombshell on him now. But all he saw was certainty. He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "You don't just walk into someone's life after everything and do this," he said. Jasmine took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Marcus, you have no idea what's really going on." And just like that, the ground beneath him felt even less stable. Marcus clenched his jaw, his mind spinning in a dozen directions. The DNA test sat between them like a loaded gun, its meaning still unraveling in his head. He wanted to yell, to demand answers, but something in Jasmine's eyes stopped him. This wasn't just a cruel game. There was something deeper, something she wasn't saying. His best friend Caleb shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Marcus, man, maybe we should step outside," he suggested, his tone cautious. But Marcus barely heard him. His thoughts were tangled in the past, moments that now felt uncertain. His marriage had ended in betrayal, but was it the same betrayal he had believed? Had he spent all these years angry about the wrong thing? Jasmine sighed. "I know this is a lot, but you need to understand, I had no choice." Marcus' heart pounded. No choice about what? Jasmine hesitated. "About keeping the biggest secret of your life." Marcus felt the weight of Jasmine's words settle over him like a heavy fog. The biggest secret of his life. His fingers curled into fists on the table as he fought to steady his breathing. Everything in him told him to walk away, to leave this conversation buried in the past where it belonged. But he couldn't. Not now. Not with the way Jasmine was looking at him. The room around them felt impossibly small. The air was thick with unspoken tension, and even the faint murmur of conversation from the other tables seemed distant, muffled. Caleb leaned in slightly, his expression tight with concern. "Marcus, man, you good?" Marcus barely nodded, his eyes locked on Jasmine. "Start talking," he said, his voice low and controlled. Jasmine took a slow breath, glancing at the envelope on the table before looking back at him. "I never wanted to tell you like this," she admitted, "but you had to know. You built your life on a lie, Marcus, and I couldn't let you walk away without the truth." His patience was unraveling. "What truth?" His voice was sharp now, his frustration leaking through. Jasmine hesitated, her fingers tightening around the back of the chair in front of her. For the first time she looked unsure. Then finally she spoke. "The child you thought was yours, isn't." Silence. The words hung between them, cutting through the noise, through the years of anger and heartbreak. Marcus blinked, his mind rejecting the sentence even as it repeated in his head. He felt like the floor had just disappeared beneath him. His breath came uneven now. "No," he muttered. His voice didn't even sound like his own. "That's not possible." Jasmine's face was unreadable. "I'm sorry." Marcus's pulse roared in his ears, his son. The boy he had fought for, the child he had lost sleep over, the one thing that had made all the pain worth enduring, none of it was real. No, he wouldn't believe it. He couldn't believe it. His hands trembled as he snatched the DNA test off the table, scanning the paper again. Looking for an error, some kind of mistake. His vision blurred. The results were undeniable. "How long have you known?" His voice was eerily calm, but something dark was simmering beneath the surface. Jasmine swallowed hard. "Since before the divorce?" A sharp, bitter laugh escaped him. "Before." He let the word hang, shaking his head in disbelief. "You've known for years, and never told me." "I wanted to," Jasmine said quickly, "but I was scared. I didn't know how to fix it. And by the time I got the courage, we were already tearing each other apart." Marcus pushed back his chair abruptly, the screech of wood against tile cutting through the thick silence. "You let me believe you was mine," he said, his voice raw. "You let me fight for him. You let me love him." Jasmine's eyes glistened. "I know," she whispered. Marcus felt his world closing in, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. His entire life, everything he had believed in, had just shattered in a single moment, and the worst part? He still didn't know what to do next. Marcus' mind was a storm, but before he could say another word, Jasmine spoke again. This time, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's more." His stomach twisted. More? What else could she possibly say to make this worse? He stared at her, his pulse hammering in his ears. Jasmine took a shaky breath. "The reason I never told you, it wasn't just because I was scared. Someone made me keep quiet." Marcus frowned. "What are you talking about?" Jasmine glanced around, lowering her voice even more. "There were things going on behind the scenes during our marriage that you never knew about. I wasn't the only one keeping secrets." She swallowed hard. "Your best friend, Caleb, he knew." Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. He turned to Caleb, his expression unreadable. Caleb shifted in his seat, avoiding his gaze. "Tell me she's lying," Marcus said, his voice sharp. Caleb exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Then finally he looked up. "Man, I wanted to tell you, but I couldn't." Marcus's blood ran cold. First his son. Now his best friend? His world was falling apart faster than he could catch it. And the worst part? He had no idea who he could trust anymore. Marcus's breath was heavy, his body tense as he stared at Caleb, his best friend. The one person who had stood by him through every heartbreak, every betrayal. And now, he was part of this? "Start talking," Marcus demanded, his voice dangerously low. Caleb sighed, glancing at Jasmine before looking back at Marcus. "I found out a few months before the divorce," he admitted. Jasmine was scared. She wanted to tell you, but... "But what?" Marcus cut in, his fists clenched. Caleb hesitated, then dropped his head. "Because the real father is my brother." The room spun. Marcus gripped the edge of the table, his legs suddenly weak. What? Jasmine's face was pale. I never meant for it to happen, Marcus. It was a mistake. A terrible, horrible mistake. Marcus's head pounded. He had braced himself for betrayal, but this, his best friend's asterisk brother asterisk. Someone he had known for years? Caleb exhaled. I didn't know at first, but when I figured it out, I begged her to come clean. She was afraid. And honestly, man, so was I. Marcus ran a hand down his face, his anger burning. He had been fighting for a child that wasn't his. A marriage that had been built on lies. And all this time, the people closest to him had known the truth. Jasmine stepped forward. Marcus, I know you hate me. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But there's one more thing you need to know. His head snapped up, his patience at its breaking point. What now? Jasmine's eyes filled with tears. He still thinks you're his father. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Of course he did. That little boy, innocent in all of this, had no idea. To him, Marcus was the only father he had ever known. His entire body tensed as the weight of it all settled over him. He could walk away, cut all ties, leave this nightmare behind. But could he really abandon the one person in this mess who had done nothing wrong? The room was silent, waiting for his response. Marcus inhaled sharply. I need time, he finally said. Jasmine nodded. Caleb looked down. Marcus turned, walking out of the restaurant without looking back. His world had just been shattered, and now he had to figure out if he had the strength to rebuild it. Marcus stepped outside into the cool night air, his chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. The city lights blurred in his vision, his mind a chaotic mess of emotions. Everything he thought he knew had been ripped apart in a matter of minutes. His son wasn't his best friend had known. His marriage had been over long before he realized. But one thing remained. The little boy who still saw him as his father. As much as he wanted to walk away and never look back, the truth was more complicated. That child didn't ask for any of this. And no matter what the DNA test said, Marcus had been there for every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every moment that mattered. Biology didn't change that. But could he live with the truth, knowing the foundation had been built on a lie? The door behind him creaked open. Footsteps. He didn't turn around. I know you're angry, Caleb's voice was cautious. And I don't blame you. Marcus exhaled slowly. Avery doesn't even cover it. A long pause. Then Caleb spoke again. I know I messed up, man. I should have told you. I was just trying to protect everyone, but I ended up making it worse. Marcus finally turned to face him. You didn't just betray me. You let me fight for something you knew wasn't real. Caleb's jaw tightened. That kid asterisk is asterisk real, Marcus. And no matter how much you hate me, you love him. That hasn't changed. The words stung because they were true. Marcus shook his head, letting out a bitter chuckle. Funny. The only thing that feels real in this mess is the one thing I'm not even sure I can hold on to. Caleb sighed. Then don't make a decision tonight. Take your time. Figure out what you can live with. Marcus didn't respond. He was too drained, too exhausted from carrying the weight of a truth he never asked for. As Caleb walked away, Marcus stood there, staring at the city lights. The anger was still there, the betrayal still fresh, but beneath it all was something else. A choice. He could let this break him, or he could find a way to move forward. Not for Jasmine, not for Caleb, but for the little boy who still called him Dad. With a deep breath, Marcus pulled out his phone, staring at the picture of his son. No matter what had happened, one thing was certain. That boy was still his world, and somehow, he would find a way to make it right.